Voice of Truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Don't underestimate
the power of a single
It could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chatline.
conversations that matter.
This is what I ask. Let me always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I bring my
Hello, everyone. Welcome to INCRadio Chatline, where we have conversations that matter. I'm Elsom John Cruz, live here from Rockford, Illinois, and joining me in our conversation today for our topic is one of my close friends. She's in Michigan, but I forgot what. No, I know it's not Sterling Heights today. I know it's a different place. I keep forgetting what that place is called.
I forget sometimes too. It's okay, EJ. We're in Farmington Hills today. Farmington Hills, Michigan, and it is kind of chilly. That's why I have different layers on right now. It's in the 60s, but there's no sun. So it's kind of cold today. We are in October, so yeah, we'll see how the weather will be like. I know you're wearing a jacket.
And I'm also wearing a jacket because it's also a little bit chilly here in Illinois. I feel like maybe because we're also kind of close to the lake, we're also kind of feeling a little bit of the cold a little bit earlier than the rest of the states, right? So thank you for joining me here today, and of course there in our team live chat as well. Thank you for joining us in our conversation about tactful timing. So let's talk about that word tactful. Like when you hear the word tactful, like what how do you define tactful?
Whenever I hear this word, I just imagine like holding my tongue. Like that's always the imagery that comes up. I think of the thumbtack too. It's kind of like, when you get, like poked or something, right? You get poked and you're like, ah! And then like that you just like kind of you hold on to the sound that you make like when you get poked or something like from the tack. That's how I remember it anyway. I don't know, my brain just works that way.
It kind of makes me think like when you're trying to say, like, before you say something, you kind of like poke yourself in like thumbtack, like, oh, like
Yeah, that's
stop the train of
exactly
thought, like, oh no.
exactly like that. That's how it feels anyway. Like, oh, okay.
There you go. Yeah, like for me, I guess it's also kind of it's similar in the way of like the way I think of like tactful, or tactful is kind of like you consider your words before you say it. 'Cause it makes me think of like the inverse, right? When someone says, like, when you hear someone comment, "Oh, you have no tact," right? It's like, oh, it means like you just say things without thinking sometimes, right? Like, or it's not the like the saying, "Read the room." Like you can't read the room. Like that's sort
The
of like the
cues,
inverse, yeah.
right? The different cues that come with that, yeah.
Mm.
Tactful. Yeah, I just think of just, like you're about to say something, but then like, zip. Nope, never mind.
You stop
Change my
it.
mind.
You stop because your brain's like, wait, hold on. Before you say that, let's consider this first, right? Like I feel like that's tactful. Then like you know how to read the situation. Then before you comment on something. So that's kind of like what we are going to be talking about. First off, it's like like when we choose like our moment to say something. So for you, like, how do you identify, or how do you find you know when it's the right time to say something? Let's say you notice something in someone, maybe a behavior or something, like before you point it out. Like, how do you find that right time?
That's such a hard question, Ish.
I feel like
Finding
it
the
kind of
right
dropped you off like
time.
deep end there.
It depends what you're talking about, right? Like one of the examples that I always hear is, when let's say we're out eating and we're at a restaurant and you have spinach, or you have like a tomato stuck in your, or some seeds stuck in your teeth, right?
Mm.
You have the option of saying it aloud to the whole whoever is in attendance, right?
Mm.
Or you have the option of, maybe, I mean, now we have the option of like shooting someone a text, right? Be like, hey, by the way, you have
Mm.
something that you might want to like clean out. Or just taking someone, I guess back in the day before cell phones, you would just speak to them or whisper to them privately. So it depends on what you're trying to communicate, I
Mm.
guess, is what it is. I'm
Mm.
not for one. I try not to be, or I try to remember, right, being tactful, to not put
Mm.
people on the spot like that, because I know for me it's like mortifying. You're like, oh, thanks for
Yeah,
letting
that's
me
the thing.
know.
You know how it feels, right? When like let's say you are the person with like the spinach like on your teeth, and someone just makes a comment out loud, like, "Oh, you have spinach on your teeth." Like you're sitting a couple seats away from them. Like you're sitting at this table, you're eating with friends or family, and if someone just makes that comment, you know how it would make you feel, right? So I guess that's one way to I know to look at it, right? Like how would it make you feel if someone did it like that way, right? Like in that example, if someone before you say something, think of it in the the reverse. Think of it like in the reverse, like you're the person with spinach on your teeth. Like how would you want someone to address that? Would you want them to just like, would you want someone to just like, oh, you have, oh, you have spinach on your teeth. Like, oh, wait, no, I don't like how that feels. I don't like how that would make me feel. So, what's another way to do it, right? I feel like that's, I know, that kind of becomes the, like I guess for me, that's the, I know, that's how I try to figure out when it's the time to say something. It's like, how would it make me feel if someone were to, to do it that way,
Which
right?
is empathy, right? It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm hearing from you there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Empathy.
I
Mm-hmm.
see I see Nathan put there in the live chat. He sounds like, shout out to Rod Kayak, because he does the acronyms on Faith and Melody, and he put there, tactful, taking all consideration to feel, understanding, listening. That's good. I would have never
Mm-hmm.
thought of that. I would have never thought of that, Nathan. And then hello also to Kathleen, who's there in the live chat, as well as we had some others earlier. Adelaida Juan, as well as Luisa de Torres, and earlier was, I think, Doxa Yenga from the Philippines as well.
Thank you for tuning in with us. I know it's especially there's those in the Philippines. I know it's like late. It's like pretty late for you guys there. So thank you for joining us in our conversation. We're just figuring out, like how, or like the question is how you figure out like when the right time is to comment on something, and like when we've been talking about, and I'm glad that you brought up or you mentioned empathy, because that was the word I was looking for
Yeah.
earlier, and I couldn't figure it out. Like, well, I know there's a word for it, but like what was the word when you consider, right, how someone would feel before you comment on something. So let's say you actually do comment on it now. You chose, okay, I'm gonna address this. I'm gonna say something about it. Like, does the way we word then does the way we word the sentence then matter?
Yes. In a short answer, again, going back to what is it, right? Like, what are we talking about? What are we being tactful about? What are we sharing, I guess, with the other person? Um,
Okay, I'll give you an example. I feel like it'll make it easier if I give you an example. Let's say, I'll put myself in the line of fire here. Like, let's say you're gonna comment about my weight.
um, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a good point. More sensitive topics is, you want to be a little bit more careful about how you word things.
Mm,
Although I think it depends on our relationship too, about what I'm capable of saying to you. Like, if I just saw you on the street, I don't think I would.
Yeah.
tell me something like that, right? Or like if we're just like acquaintances, I don't know if I would feel comfortable bringing something like that up to you. But word choice definitely makes an impact. I've been told that in conversations
Because I'm
with
gonna say there have been a person not gonna name names because I feel like it might put them in a bad light. So I'm not gonna name names, but I have heard and I get the intention. I get the intention when they said this to me. I get the intention, so it doesn't. It didn't really hurt me in a way when I've heard someone comment about my weight in the way that like, wow, I haven't seen you in a long time. You've really gained weight. Or like it's I actually said that like a little bit nicer than because the way they use the word they use is like fat.
got it. Okay.
Like they told me that I've gotten like fat, and the only way that I thought of it is like I know, but couldn't you have said that like in a nicer like
A
way?
different way, right?
Because now I
Yeah.
just feel bad about my win.
Nathan put their method of communication. Sometimes a call is warranted and not a text. Yeah, guilty.
Mm,
Guilty. It's kind of different now, right? That adds a little element of this, I
mm,
think. Being tactful with different things and word choice and reading tone and all those different things. What I will say is that because we're talking right now, we're talking about word choice. There was a recent experience with one of my friends, and I guess it depends on preferences too, because like with you, EJ, I for those who may not know, me and EJ have been friends for a long time, and I can be pretty direct with him when it when it comes to situations. We tend to encourage our friends, or if we feel like there's something that we need to address, we can be a little bit more direct. But I have some other friends who they would prefer it to be a different way. So, for example, instead of me saying like, "Oh, like I'm disappointed," or "Oh, like you upset me," they would prefer something like telling me telling them what they would want me to do it instead. So, like, let's say like, "Oh, you didn't hang out with me," and blah blah blah, like EJ, as
mm.
opposed to saying like, "I wish we could have hung out more." X Y Z, blah 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 blah.
I feel
Like
like I
having the
understood even like that first one.
yeah.
Like that first one sounded to me like, oh, she wants to hang out. Like, that's-
Yeah, so I guess getting to in that way, which is sometimes, because to your point earlier, what I've realized is that sometimes I might just observe something, or I might just realize something, and I might be inclined to comment, right?
Mm,
And I think that's what happens, right? When you meet someone after a long time, and you might have these observations that just come up, and you're like, oh, and you're not sure if you want to mention it, like, oh, like even just in your mind, like, oh, it looks like they look more tired than they normally do, or like they look like
mm,
they're there's differences that you might notice, but you're not really. That's where the tactfulness, I think, comes in, where you figure out whether or not you're going to say that.
yes.
um the method and all of those other things come into play, and the kind of relationship that you have, and the purpose in telling them in the first place, right? But it's what's challenging about it, for me at least, that makes this topic very vulnerable, is that um I feel like actions that I've taken have been things that maybe I would want for myself, without considering what someone else is capable of handling, or what someone else is able to handle at that moment, right? Because
Mm,
I think that could be true, like in the situation that you posed earlier, where it's like, for somebody who would mention like, oh, it looks like you gained weight, maybe that's normal for them,
mhm,
like that's normal for them to just say that, because that's what's been done to them their whole life, and that's why they're like that, as opposed to someone else who they're used to a completely different way of addressing those things. So it's really nuanced in what your experiences are, and what you're comfortable with, and again, the relationships that we're talking about, when we're talking about being tactful, it's with other people, right?
mm.
It's with these different situations, so it's kind of like
I feel like I kind of brought up like a different, like a new like idea in my mind. Like when you mentioned like that thing about like experiences, is that like sometimes someone's, like when someone makes that comment, like let's say the person that commented like on like let's say my weight gain, like for them that might have just been normal, right? And I didn't, like at the time, even earlier, I didn't even think of it like that way, you know. Like when you brought it up, it's like, oh, you might, that brings an interesting point of like for them that might have just been like normal, like that might have just been normal. Like they didn't mean it, and they didn't mean it in like the way to like to hurt or to offend. It's just so like like a matter of fact to them, like oh like I can say this, I can say this thing because like it doesn't, I know it doesn't hurt me when someone says them to me because I'm used to it. But then you also brought up how sometimes that we and I'm gonna say I'm guilty of that too, like making like comments and then like looking back on it like I don't know if they were okay with me saying that. Or I know like I understood like the intention when I said it, but now that I look back on it, I don't know how that made them feel. And I try to analyze like the rest of like the conversation, like if they seem like more uncomfortable after I said it. It's like sometimes I know don't I would say don't be too harsh on yourself. Like if you do end up like saying something that uh, might have not gone the way you intended over to the other person. Because sometimes it happens. Like you don't mean to be not tactful, but like what I know, like what you said, Tony, is because of our experiences, we might think that something's like, oh, it's just normal. It's just normal. Like I don't need to, I don't need to think too hard on it. But it does matter, right? How we word like something. So, like that kind of makes me interested in that one. Like bring up like what's like sort of like your process before you make like a comment then like kind of maybe, oh wait, you know what, I'll give you some time to think because
I was
for
gonna say
me
I don't have one. I don't think I have one, but I wanted to say hello also to Melvi and Carolyn who just popped into the live chat. They're talking there, and then Kathleen added, "I don't know if there's ever a good time to make unsolicited is a good word, to make
mm,
unsolicited comments about weight or hair, anything to do with appearances." One of the
mm,
things that I've seen before on social media, not as a hard rule to live by, right, but it's just something that I've noticed is that one comment that seemed to resonate with a lot of people is like if you if there's something that you notice about someone that they can't fix in, like, I don't know if it's like 30 seconds or like a
um,
minute, like don't bring it up.
I think I've seen that
Yeah,
exact same
yeah,
video that you're talking about.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if it's like a, something that, maybe like there's something in your teeth or whatever, or it's just like a tie that you need to fix, like that's an easy fix. But if it's something that's, you know that is not like, you obviously cannot fix that thing within, like, you cannot drop 5 pounds in 30 seconds, right, AJ? So
Mhm.
why would you bring it up? But oh, that's a good question. Is uncomfortable silence better than a less than tactful comment?
Ooh.
I guess it depends on what it is, right? It always depends on what the context of the conversation is, and the topic. Because your question, EJ, was the process
Like
of
you're
what
starting like your process.
I think that's a large part of why it can be challenging sometimes, right? Because when you're having conversation and the words are flowing, and sometimes things might just come out, right? Like
I feel
maybe.
like that's when I prefer text over like call because I feel like when I'm texting someone, like I have time to think, right? I have the time to actually think of like what I'm going to say, and if like before I even send it, like you sort of like you sort of like read through it, like, okay, how does this sound? You can edit, you can delete stuff, you can edit stuff, before you send. But with conversations, if you said it, like, you can't, like, not like in a text, you can't erase it. You can't just erase it and reword it.
I mean, you could backtrack, but it's harder to backtrack
Mm, mm,
once it's been said a little bit, right?
yes.
Yeah,
And
I don't know that I have a process, so I don't know how to answer your question.
this, for me, it's like, I think it's said this before, like, I have this sort of like graph, like, is it a chart or a graph, like, where it's like, like, it's, would this be uncomfortable for them to hear? Yes, but would this help them in the long run? Yes. Okay, then say it. Like, will this be uncomfortable for them? Yes. Will this help them in the long run? No. Don't say it. Right? Like, if it, like, the more important caveat there is, like, would this help them in the long run? Right? But then, like, what we've been talking, like, even with, like, let's say, comments about weight, or like, even so, this with, like, the things that they can't, with the things that they can't change, like, Kat said, don't mention it. There's never, I feel like there would never be a right time to mention it. But I feel like, weight, that's something you can change. Like for me, I know my weight is something that I can control. It's something I can change. But there's also a way to bring it up, right? That's not going to, what's the word? It's not going to affect them negatively, because, just saying, there are ways that I've heard, like what I said, like, I've heard comments about my weight that, instead of, like, making me feel like I want to, like, making me feel that, okay, let's make this change, it made me feel more just upset that I have the, like, and I know that there were comments too that have helped me with that. Like, it's not even comments, just actions that people have taken, right? Like, oh, let's go to the gym, like, oh, you should try this, I know, you should try this salad. And I know that sounds sarcastic, but the way that they said it's like they acknowledge that salad might not taste good for me, but they also like, help me in the way that, oh, like, if it doesn't, it won't taste good to you if you're not used to eating it. So try adding this and this and this first, and once you get more used to it, like, you can take this out, you can take the cheese out, you can take the chicken out. You can eat with less, like, dressing. Like, for me, that's helpful. That's a helpful way to bring it out. Like, that helps, rather than just saying, wow, you've gained weight. Right? Like, because, like, actually, I want to hear what you because I saw you. I saw you on it, so I want to hear what your thoughts
Well,
are.
I was gonna read what Kat put in the live chat, because this has happened to me, where an alternative to conversation starter, right? Instead of pointing out physical things, asking them how they've been, or about the weather, because like what we mentioned earlier, it's been a long time since you're catching up with someone, and like
Mm.
sometimes a comment that I've gotten is similar to what you said. It's like, oh, you gained weight. It's like, how are you would have been nice. Like, alternatives, I guess, to conversation starters, like being able to kind of find different ways to bridge the conversation, as opposed to something that we just
Like,
notice.
mine's always, my go-to is like, when's the last time I saw you? Just like asking them,
Mm,
like, when was the last time I saw you? It's been a long time. And I feel like I tend to comment more on height than weight, but not in the way like, oh, you're the same. It's like, oh, wow, you've like, you've grown from the last time I've seen you. And especially with, like, with my kids. Well, they're not my kids, but they're kids that I knew when we were in their locale. So when I see them, I'm like, wow, I didn't even recognize you. Like, you're really grown up. Like, those are ano. But there was no, there were two comments there in live chat that made me kind of laugh. It's like the untactful left unread or not read at all. But but with Nate and Care, I just wanna say this. Like sometimes it's that they accidentally open your message when they didn't mean to, because you know how like it pops up sometimes while they're, you know, like you might be in the middle of something and you try to click
You
something
weren't
on top
ready.
and then the notification pops up and you accidentally
You
click
weren't
it.
ready.
And you're like, oh wait, I'll go back to that. I just gotta finish this first. And then you forget. And then you forget that I know that you have to respond. So to the other person, it looks like you just read their message and just didn't respond to it. You know, like I get
Most.
that. I know that happens, or maybe they did intend to. I know they did intend to reply, but
Or you
they.
reply in your head. Have you ever done that? Like
Hmm?
I reply in my head, like, oh, this is gonna
Oh
be a good
yes,
phone
I
call,
have.
and then I don't type it out.
Mhm.
Like, oh,
Like I have done that where it's like you're reading the message and you're thinking of the response, and then you close your phone, and you know you might be in the middle of doing something else, and you're like, did I did I type that out or did I just think of it? And then you go back and you're like, oh, I didn't say anything. Or when they send like a follow up, and you're like, oh, I thought I replied to this already. So I guess like you kind of what's the word for it? You give them the benefit of the doubt, right? When they don't, I know when they don't respond right away. If they actually like if you're left on red, maybe they're just thinking of the answer. They're just thinking like, how do I is especially if it's like, let's say it's depending on the conversation, a more serious conversation. Maybe they're just
requires more
thinking of
brain
like,
power.
yeah, they're just thinking of their response. Like, how do I say this?
Like, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that.
Mm.
There's some other comments there in the live chat about. I'm not sure if this if this is this a comment that you've received, Nathan? Like,
Huh.
what's up? And they said your weight. That's
No.
that's. I hope that wasn't something.
Yeah, I hope that's just a no. I hope that's just a joke,
Yeah,
because that's I know. I feel like yeah, that's. I mean, it's not even just not tactful. That's just straight up mean.
yeah, that one's.
I know.
And then Kat put, she's gotten. You lost weight. Were you sick? I don't know if that's better than you.
Mm,
I don't. I
yeah, I
both
don't know.
feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable. I think if it makes you uncomfortable, it just.
Mm. Like I think with things like wait, like like you said earlier, it's like a more sensitive topic. So it really depends on who's making that comment, and then uh like it, how you they say it
Right.
like matters, right? Like, and we can't as I say, we can't really control how people will comment on those things. It's like more for us, right? How would we comment on like something similar? Like if we want to make that, I don't know, if we want to comment on something similar, how would we? How would we?
And our reaction too, right? Our reaction to
Mhm.
those things as well. Being able to, because I guess on the one hand, if you're depending on the relationship, right? Like you could comment and let them know, like, hey, that comment, I wasn't really comfortable with that comment. But again, it depends on the relationship, right? And then also, choosing to just not retaliate, because maybe sometimes the the instinct or the wants might be to retaliate, but it's like, no, just give the benefit of the doubt that maybe they didn't mean it the way that it came
Mhm.
off. Like, because sometimes it can come off really.
Especially in text when you can't hear, right? You can't hear the tone that they're saying it, with. Like for me, I just try to think of like, oh, maybe I just thought it like their voice like in my head is just it was different than the way they said it.
I've been told I'm a dry texter. I've been told I'm a dry texter. So yeah, it just depends. It just depends on who you're talking to and the conversations that you're having, I guess.
Mm. Actually, since you brought this up, like you brought this up earlier, so it reminded me like, how do you think maybe like social media has affected the way like people have gotten into like like before in terms of like considering their words before they speak. How do you think social media has affected that?
Uh One thing I would say is that it, because at least the way that I felt it with any technology, right? Um, when you're conversing or you're communicating through technology, there's still kind of a wall there, right? There's
Mm,
still kind of a wall, and you don't really get to see someone's reactions or the real time of the things that you're saying.
mm,
So sometimes what I've observed, especially like if you read the comment section of some posts, sometimes people can be very
mm,
blunt,
mm,
like overly to the point where it's like they're not afraid to say the things that they're saying. But like, could you still say the same thing if the person was standing in front of you? Like, would you be as brave to say those things? And it kind of numbs you out in that way a little bit, right? Where you're like, when you're not seeing the person's face, or that you don't, because to what you're looking at, you're just looking at a picture, or you're just looking at a name. It's
mm,
just a message conversation. Whereas like if we're speaking, even just now, even just as we're speaking now, it would be very difficult for me to say something, not just because we're on air, but it would be very difficult for me to say something, harsh to you, and seeing the live reaction of, I can see, those cues of like, oh, you're getting uncomfortable, or I can tell you're getting like sad or upset. It's
mm,
a lot harder to do it when you have that face there. So I would say that, of course, social media is not, I'm not out to like demonize it. It has great
mm,
benefits in terms of being able to keep everybody connected and just having that option to be able to talk to people. But the trade-off in that way, right? There's a trade-off there where, it can kind of numb you out if you aren't aware of it. I think that's what it is there, that I try to be aware of. I tend to over explain or over communicate, because that's what my fear is that I don't want to come off dry, or I don't want to come off in a way that sounds like I don't care, or like it being dismissive, or anything like that. So but
Is
it
that
just
like because
depends
you can't, like you said, you can't see their face, and especially if it's like like those more like a public like post
on.
where just anyone can see it, and sometimes with the algorithm it gets recommended to them, and they actually see it. I feel like that's when like might see like strangers, uh because for you it's like, oh, they're a stranger to me, I don't know them, like even if they see this comment, what are they gonna do? They don't know who I am, they don't know where I live. Right? Like people tend to be meaner, or like just to put it in a nicer way, to be more blunt in those comments. And like especially with maybe uh the younger crowd, it's I don't know, because how like social media is like very, I would say social media is very public now, where like it's not like, for me, the way I use it is just like, I have my friends and family, and they're like the only people I interact with. I interact with social media, but with like there's like uh, I don't know if I can say it, but like the social media platform where you can share like short videos with like that, like different challenges that they you can participate in, right? Like for me, like that kind of like social media, it's like it's more open to have like just anyone like comment on it. I feel like since it's very very popular, like it ends up being you sort of like, what's the word for like, detached from like the feeling of like, oh, like I don't need to be as empathetic or sympathetic, when I'm making this comment. I can just comment something mean, but it's gonna be, it's mean, but it's funny, so I'm just gonna say it. You know, like I feel like that's when it happens, or the way that I think, like that's the way it affects, right? The way people think, especially if you're more uh like if you're more online than most people, and I'm trying to find a nice way to say it. If you're more online than most people, right? You consume a lot of like that media. You might forget when you're actually talking like with someone like in person or like in text, like someone you know, and you end up making that comment, right? Like they're like, that's when you hear the comment, like, wow, couldn't you have said that like a nicer way? You're like, oh wait, they know me. They know where I live. They know my family. Like they know me personally.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say there is that it makes you braver to do those to
Mhm.
be. It could not all the time. I'm not to generalize it. It could make you
It could,
braver to
yeah.
do those things because it's like your identity is a little, except especially like if you're like if your handle on social media is not the same as like your actual name, right? Or if you
Mhm.
don't have your name there, like I don't have my name on some social media that I have, so it's like you know the identity is it's not attached, so then you're not as like, oh, you're not as careful. So those are definitely things to think about, right? How it changes our approach to things and our attitude in terms of the things that we're saying and how we're saying them and delivery and tone and all those things. Hello to Zenaida Novasteris who's tuning in with us there in the live chat, as well as Mario Oka. We have our brethren are tuning in from the Philippines. We appreciate it because it's really late there. It's already like past midnight, but thanks for staying up with us. Kat said, "I don't hold back compliments." So
Mhm.
yeah, compliments are always a good way to go about it, and not just physical stuff, right? That you can always opt for other things like, oh, I really liked how you spoke at that meeting, or I really like the way that you carry yourself. Your confidence is really, it's something like that. Something different, like looking for alternatives as opposed to just not saying anything, right? Because tactfulness, I feel like sometimes we might just associate it with just not saying anything at all, but there are alternatives that you could say
Yes.
instead, right?
Like there
Kind of
there
again,
is a way to say it, like like with the waiting, there is a way to comment about like without being or with there's a tactful way, right, to bring it up. There's a tactful way to
it
mention it.
requires more
And
work. I would say it requires more work and more thinking
mm,
than maybe we might be used to. Just because it requires more effort, but it helps. It does help.
makes me think of like the like Cat's comment made me think of like the compliment sandwich, like when you're trying to like let's say trying to comment on like something, say the presentation that they led, and you have a comment on like how they could make it better. Like you you started with a compliment, and then the and then the positive critics. What's that? Right? Helpful criticism. What's
Ne-
the Yeah,
It's
helpful
negative.
criticism.
It's the criticism in the middle.
Yes, and then you go next to another compliment. Like, it's a nicer way to to put it
Well,
than
I would say
just.
it's nicer and it's helpful too, right?
Mhm.
Because what I'll say, I feel like for that kind of technique, at least in my experience, it's applied more in like the workplace or in
Mhm.
things that you have to perform. In terms of like let's say you're doing like some kind of a performance as a musician, right?
Mhm.
A positive, negative, positive. Is nice to hear because you can see what you did right, and then you can see where you can still improve on. I actually learned that concept from Darlene. Shout out to Darlene Dizon. Um, she was telling me that before in terms of being able to critique myself, even being tactful, I guess, with yourself, like the things that you're saying to yourself, being able to have that positive, and then you can list as many negatives as you want. It could be like a bunch, it could be like
Mhm.
a whole page, but then making sure that you still end with the positive there. So
Mhm. Even with the
constructive.
negative, I feel like the way I try to put it now, like with myself, is like I put it in a list. Like not necessarily, oh, you did this, no, you did this wrong, you did this, like where I in a way almost force myself to feel bad about it because I don't know where the mindset of like if I don't feel bad about it, then I haven't really reflected on it. Like that's not necessarily true. Like I guess the way I put it like in my mind, it's like more matter of fact. Like okay, like these are the things you did wrong. These are the things you can improve. Like it's Like it has those bullet points. It's on a list, like on my mind. Like these are things you still gotta work on. Let's work on them. I like what you said, being tactful with yourself. That's all. Like the way you make those, right? Those mental comments, right? On your end, in your mind. So actually, like moving on to like the why of like when in terms of like being mindful. Like, why do we have to be like mindful of like what we say? Like we've been talking about it. So like for you, like why are you mindful? Like what you say?
It's hard to have regrets, EJ. It's hard to have regrets, and it's hard to imagine, especially for people that you're close to.
Mm-hmm.
um it's hard to imagine, even if like if it's not done, like the example that I gave earlier. you know Telling someone that, you know um you were upset by something that they did is not always one. It's not easy for like saying it, but it's also not easy for the receiver as well, like
Yeah.
knowing that you were upset by something. And if there are ways that we can kind of, again, it requires more work, right? But being able to navigate that with the different relationships that we have, it does require effort and energy, but it makes it worth it, because then it what has helped me is it helps me understand them better, and then minimizing, you can't completely, avoid it, right? But minimizing misunderstandings, minimizing, hurt feelings with things that happen, right? It's like being hurt a lot versus being like hurt, like, okay, like that hurt, but it wasn't as much as, you know the thing. Because especially when it gets to moments where it could get, you know intense because of feelings that you have or emotions that you have. um being mindful, I don't want to do anything, with the intent to just like to just hurt. I think you're the one that was saying that before. Like, you want to be able to say something that is helpful. Sorry for the noise in the background. I don't
No,
know
no worries. No.
how. But that's why it's important for me, because I'm a person. I'm really big on words. I love words. I would do it for a living, and we're trying. We're trying, but I love words a lot,
Mhm.
and they are important to me. And for my friends who I know their love language is, words of affirmation, especially like for those that you can tell that words mean something to people. They're not everything, of course, right?
Mhm.
Like, actions also are part of it, but words do, affect others because we use it all the time. That's like parts of our one of the large parts of our communication, right? To be able to share things with one another. So, um, just understanding, why am I saying the things that I'm saying. I feel like it's a constant thing in my head. Maybe that's why my brain is always moving so fast. My brain is like always moving so fast, because I'm really conscious of that. And it could be to a point of that it's a fault, but I would rather, not live with that regret of I wish I didn't, I wish I hadn't said that, or, because it's, you don't want to, you can't avoid like hurting people, but if we can minimize like how much hurt we can cause, that's where I'm at. I guess that's where I'm speaking from, in that sense, like being able to to say something, to, because it's very different, especially if they know your intention too, right? Like, if you're saying something with the intent just for the sake of like, you want them to react to something that you said, like that's one thing. But if you're saying something that's like, if I'm saying something direct to you, that I'm saying it to you in a way because I want to help you, and that's my intention. It may not always come off that way right away, but that's where the conversations happen, where you can kind of explain it that way.
Mhm.
I'm like partly laughing because of the comments in in the live chat. I'm sorry about the noise. It sounds like birds robustly, and yeah. Anyway, I won't mention the other comment, but
Yeah, it's
sorry for, yeah. I'm outside, so So those are very tactful ways of addressing the noise in the background. Right? They're turning it into something funny as opposed to saying something otherwise, right?
Because
So
I know it's you said something before, like like our words reflect, our words reflect our values, right? So the way we say things reflect the way that our values are, right? Like in the way of like like you said, you don't want to say things with the intention of just like you don't want to say things in a way that would just hurt, right, and not help. So it's very important to put it in a way that like it might hurt, but you can see that the intention is to help, right? Like yes, saying it this way, you try to minimize it, so it might still hurt a little bit, but then like the bigger part of it that they can see is that oh they want to help me, because just going back to like like let's say the comment like oh you've gained weight, like eventually I'll get there, eventually I'll understand. Like I'm speaking from experience, eventually I'll understand the intention, but it takes a longer time, it takes more effort for me to understand that, from someone, like to understand that intent from someone, than to say it in the way that like the way that someone has, where they showed it through action, right? Like let's go to the gym, like if you wanna still eat a lot, like this is a healthier way to 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 do it, because then like I see the intention of like wanting to wanting to wanting to help, and I feel like the like I kind of I don't know I kind of tend to gravitate, hang out more with like someone who I know, like like who has that sort of like thinking of like the way that they comment on things, the way that they say things, like they might be direct, they might be blunt, it might hurt, but like with with the way they say it, it's like you can still see that the intention was to help. Like they didn't say it just to be just to hurt or just to be mean, right? It's like oh, like they're saying it, they're sort of like direct with it, but I get that now, like because they followed it up with like this is what you can do, right? It's like, or this is an option, like this is an option that you can take, where it's like oh, what, you're right, you have a point. Right? So it matters too, like how you bring it up. So maybe the next time you hopefully like this is brought up like something for everyone. Tactically tactful. Touche. I just saw that comment.
I just
From
want to mention really quick, EJ,
Hmm.
because we've been talking about, because when we think of tactfulness, a lot of it is us as the individual, right, and being able to be mindful about what we say and the things that um we're going to communicate. But also, I think I mentioned earlier, but also as the recipient too, it
Hmm.
helps to kind of to think about that and be able to give the benefit of the doubt of whatever someone might be saying to us, and not um, depending on what it is, right? Like there are times where you can tell that a comment is literally like an insult. Like
Hmm.
that's not what I'm talking about. But like the things that are more gray here in terms of maybe comments that make us uncomfortable, um, as the individual being able to think that maybe they didn't mean it that way, but also communicating back, right? Like communicating back when you're not comfortable with those things, and when something has hurt you. Again, it depends on what the relationship is, right? It depends on
Hmm.
what the relationship is, and it'll be up to you how far you want to take that. Like, is it a comment that needs a conversation, or is it something that you know that you can let go and just be like, oh, that's maybe that's just how they grew up. Maybe that's just the way that they are used to, because in their country that's how they speak, right? Because everybody has different upbringings, everybody has different perspectives, and even down to language, right? The If you look at the different languages in the world, the way that people say things just structurally are really different. So considering those things, I think that's one of the words that I do want to drive out of today's topic, is just consideration for both
Mm.
ends. Having consideration for the person that you are speaking to, and having consideration for the person who is speaking to you. Like, what perspective are they coming from? Even like with ages, with like culturally, like it from different places. Of course, we still have the one culture as Christian culture, but that's one of the things that we do try to uphold, right? Is as much as possible, um, being able to be a light in that way, like a positive force, a helpful force, right? Something that's going to be there um, to look out for people, and the way that we do that is being mindful of the things that we say and our actions, to build up, right? Words that build up, that will help and encourage, um, in any way that we can, and that goes, I think it's in both ways, because it's conversations is two people, right? It takes it's one thing to just speak at a person, but like as a receiver, we also have a part as well. So I just wanted to add that, because it can be really easy when someone is not being tactful to retaliate, and that's the thing that we don't want to be the agitator. If there's something, we want to be able to keep it more um calm, or
Mhm.
I can't think of another word for it, but yeah, I just wanted to add that last part.
No, it's a very important caveat. I think.
Something I'm still learning also, by the way. We're all just
It's,
all of it's learning. There's lots of learning. So.
I'm saying that's like I feel like that's a caveat I missed there too, right? Like it's not just on the speaker but on the listener as well. Like for you as the listener, right? To also understand the intention, like they might not have said it in the most eloquent eloquent way. They might not have said it in the way that you wanted to, and you wanted to hear it, but it's also up to you to understand. I think it's really what I mentioned earlier. Like I'll get there eventually. Maybe it'll take a little bit longer. It might take me a little bit longer to get there, but I'll get there. Like I'll get there eventually. You know, I'll understand it. I'll understand as well. So this is why we should be mindful, tactful, whatever word you want to use, for it before we make a comment, right? You don't unlike unlike in maybe in some social media platforms, you pause, you think on it, like should I say this? Is this gonna be mean? Like what's the intention in saying this? What's the best way to put this? And if you're a listener, if you're the one who's like the receiver, like you said, if you're the receiver, also the way that you take the comment, especially I would say be more mindful, especially if it's text, because you never know what the tone that it's that it was said in. You might not know. You might get the wrong tone, like in your mind, of the way that
Don't
it's
overthink.
said.
Don't overthink.
Yes, don't overthink it, because you might not know. You might think that it was said one way, and like they didn't know. Like when they say it next in person, like, "Hey, what's up?" You're like, what's with you? Like, you said something so mean, but now you're friendly. And they're like, what do you mean so mean? Like this text? Oh wait, I meant that as a joke. Like, oh, oh, that was not that was a joke. Sorry, I didn't hear. I didn't hear the way you said it. So it just sounded mean to me. Those situations. I'm bringing those up because I have been in those situations where I've assumed like that they meant it one way, but when I saw them next, they explained it, and it became like, I I see. I see the way that you mean it now. I didn't get it the first time. It didn't translate. It didn't translate like the way that you. So this is like, yeah, this is why you should be mindful. Like when you're especially with timing is also another part now. Like what we've been talking about. It's not just about what you would say, also about like when, like the when, like the appropriate time to actually say something. So I hope that maybe maybe you picked something up, or you've just been able to to share like your experiences as well, your thoughts as well there in our team live chat. And again, Tony, thank you for joining me in today's conversation. You brought up a lot of points that I didn't even consider when I was reviewing this topic. And again, thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Thank you for tuning in. And we do hope that this has been a conversation that mattered for you. And we'll see you again next Friday here on INCRadio Chat Line. Look forward to our next topic. I forgot what it was, but like, I feel like it's something that you'll also enjoy listening to. So we'll see you next time here on INCRadio Chat Line. See you guys next week.
This is what I ask. Let me always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I no matter what may have my way, I will say, my God, I'm His chosen. If I need Him, now He's waiting. Oh, no matter what may have my way, I will serve my God. I'm His chosen. If I need Him, now He's waiting for me.
Ito ang